to the Relentless CEO Podcast with Adam Kifer. Follow your path to success alongside icons and industry leaders in martial arts, fitness, and more. Let's go. This is the Relentless CEO Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Relentless CEO Podcast. I am your host, Adam Kifer, and we are going to have an interesting episode today, as always. I was having a conversation with one of our newer clients, and he was just asking me a bunch of questions about how I got in the industry, like where I learned certain skills and stuff. And then at the end of this conversation, he's like, this should be a podcast episode. He's like, I've never heard your story before. So that is what is prompting this episode. We're going to talk about little Adam, young Adam, immature 20-year-old Adam, and all the Adams in between. And my goal with this is to really just sort of show you guys like the ups and downs of a growth journey. My goal is not to make this all about me, even though like obviously the central theme is going to be my life. And my reason for doing this is every time that people start asking me about certain things about my past or my history, there's always something that they identify with that they're like, I experienced that same thing, or I didn't know you were that also. Like, and it always brings in some sort of connection that gets a light bulb to go off in their head with something. And that's sort of what I want to talk to you guys about, and why I want to sort of deep dive into this. And I don't think I've ever covered this on a podcast. So it'll be interesting to talk about as well. But a lot of you guys already know this. I grew up in a martial arts school. I was a dojo rat. So my dad and mom opened up a school. I remember the original school when I was really young had green mats with like, if you guys remember the white speed letters that they had paint on the mats back in the day, it said USA Karate in the middle of the mat. I remember growing up in that school, my dad was selling Chuck Norris action figures. If you guys are old enough to remember the Chuck Norris Karate Commando cartoon, I think it was from the 80s. He would sell those in his school. We had like all sorts of kung fu shoes, pretty much anything Century Martial Arts sold at the time. My dad sold in his school. And I pretty much grew up in that school. Like I pretty much lived there. I remember my dad had a private lesson room. And when I wasn't on the mat, I was playing with action figures in that private lesson room. And I just remember from a young age sort of seeing the hustle from my parents of starting a business and growing it and just dealing with the different headaches that come along with a business. I know one of the first headaches I remember that my dad dealt with was he had an instructor that overnight stole a bunch of student files, left, and opened up a Park District program with like a bunch of his students. And I just remember just seeing my dad lose sleep over that when I was younger, and it was just like betrayal for him because he had invested all this time in this person, and they left and took a bunch of students with them. And I know many of you guys probably have similar stories as that as well. But the one constant reminder I had growing up in a martial arts school was, number one, I got a great insight into work ethic, and not just on the business side, but just seeing what went into developing great martial artists. My parents grew up teaching Hapkido, Tangsudo, Kabuto, and we'll say a sprinkling of judo. We learned a bunch of different like hip throws and tosses. We didn't learn the correct terminology or anything like that, but it was a pretty well diverse old school curriculum. Like we had 360 self-defense skills we tested on for black belt. We had probably 18 forms and like 6 weapons forms, all the basics, all the kicks, like everything. As I said before, a majority of it would never ever work in any self-defense or self-protection scenario. But back in the day, it was like tons of curriculum, and that's just sort of how it worked. And also, it wasn't like a 2-time-a-week thing back in the day. It was, I was there every day, but a lot of our students even were training like 3-4 times a week. They come in Sundays to do training for black belt testing. It was just sort of a different culture back then growing up in the martial arts industry. The one thing I'm grateful for with my parents' school is I felt like they were always a little bit ahead of the curve on the business side. Not amazing, but they're always a little bit ahead of the curve. Like I still remember their intro offer because we had it up on a whiteboard in the window. It said 3 classes, $19.97 plus uniform. So like even back then, paid trials were still happening. My parents grew up heavily involved in EFC. So when I was little Adam, like not even like 6-7 years old, I was at EFC conventions with my parents, and I remember sitting there watching the Ernie Reyes demo team on stage and seeing Commander Ned and the Kokinis's talk and Dave Kovar. I remember seeing Tommy the Green Power Ranger for the first time at an EFC convention, and first time I met Chris Casamassa was at an EFC convention, believe it or not. He was signing autographs, I think, for WMAC Masters at the time because he was on that show. And I was a kid getting Chris Casamassa's autograph, and now we work together on a bunch of different things. So it was really my introduction at that young age to business and the martial arts industry. And I always knew from a young age that martial arts was going to be what I did for a living. And like many of you, I had every person not in the martial arts industry tell me that going in the martial arts industry was a terrible choice and I'd never make money in it. I would never be able to provide a living for my family, any of that. So I heard all of that growing up from parents of like high school girlfriends, from parents of friends that were in different industries. It was just everyone looked down on the martial arts industry. It was a hobby. It was like a weird thing to do type of thing. The one thing that I also remember growing up in the martial arts industry is my mom worked full-time for a martial arts school. She also worked overnights full-time at Jewel, which was a grocery store by us. So work ethic, if I learned work ethic from everyone, it was my mom. Like I remember she would come home super, super late, like middle of the night, early morning. She'd sleep for a few hours, and then she would wake up and she'd go to the karate school, and she'd work karate school all night. She'd go from the karate school, she'd go to Jewel, and then she worked overnight at Jewel. And it was like this cycle, which at the time I didn't really get it because I was so young. I didn't really understand like the sacrifice that she was making just to be able to provide for the family. And obviously, if I had to guess, the school probably wasn't very profitable at the time, and that's why she was working 2 jobs. It was probably to support the school. So I just grew up around that work ethic, and we would always call it mission from God mode. Like when my mom was in work mode, because she would just be completely focused, tunnel vision. Like her productivity and efficiency was next level. Like no one understood how she got so much done in a day. And it's just, she had this drive and focus that really was a driving force behind my parents' school success. But anyway, I remember they started this little school with this green mat, right? Then they eventually moved to a bigger school, sort of nicer mat, not huge, but like a good size school, maybe 3,000 square feet type of school. And we were probably there from ages 6 to maybe 12, 13 at this location. And this is where I really started to get more involved in the training aspect of martial arts. I remember I was in Black Belt Club at the time. I was doing every seminar that I could go to. I was absorbing. I know my dad brought in like all different people from EFC back in the day come and do seminars. So we had of course get it, that experience and being able to, especially like Dave Kovar, being able to learn how to teach from him at such a young age. Like I still remember so many of those lessons, like praise, correct praise, and the 3 times rule, and all of those things sort of ingrained in me at a young age, just because my dad was so great about bringing in experts to our school to give outside advice, outside opinions. And I think what that did is it opened up my mind when I started to run businesses and started to actually run businesses in the martial arts industry. Is I just knew that there was so much information out there in other industries. Like my dad did great bringing information from within the industry, just from outside the area. Obviously, internet wasn't a thing back then. So if you wanted to learn what this awesome school in Florida was doing, you're flying that person out and having them teach. And my dad was always great about that. He would bring in everyone from Kovar to Melody Schumann when she was Melody Schumann, to Tom Callis, like all these people my dad would bring in to teach seminars, Mike Stone back in the day, Bill Wallace. And the exposure to just being able to get that many different opinions, I think helped me be very open-minded, not only in martial arts, but also just in the business side of things, because it wasn't just, you have to do it this way and there's no other way to do it. Like we didn't grow up in a martial arts school like that. It was, hey, let's find out what the best people are doing so we can learn and really take that and run with it. And I think that really just transferred to the business world for me, where I was like, our industry did a great job really bringing in experts from within the industry for a long time. But then I started getting exposed to other industries and what people were doing at a higher level, bigger scale, talking about like hundreds of millions of dollars compared to us like doing $30,000 at an average martial arts school or whatever that might be. And like sort of had that same mentality that my dad had running a martial arts school, where I was like, well, let me find the best people and let's start bringing them into our industry, because there's so many experts out there doing things at such a higher level than what we're seeing in our industry, and not for lack of effort in our industry, that I was like, well, how do we get Tim Grover? How do we get this person to come in and really just spend time teaching us what they do best, so that way our industry as a whole can grow. So I contribute a lot of that to just how my parents ran their school. Now, when I was 12 years old is when I taught my first martial arts class. And I still remember this scenario to this day. Mr. Rudman, who was one of my dad's instructors, awesome instructor, really great guy. He was sick one day for an intermediate class. And I would never taught a class on my own. I was like an assistant, and I put that in quotation marks. Like, and by assistant, I mean I was on the mat while classes were happening, and I'd occasionally actually really assist. But I was more of a placeholder because I was so young and just didn't have any experience. But I remember Mr. Redmond called in sick one day, and my dad's like, "Hey, you're teaching intermediate class today." And I was like, "Excuse me?" He's like, "Yep." He's like, "You're teaching intermediate class." I had no assistants. It was like probably 8 or 10 kids on the mat. We had no class plans back in the day. And then it wasn't rotating curriculum, so every belt had its own curriculum. So I just remember my dad had these curriculum sheets on the wall for every belt. And I remember before class, I'm like, all right, purple belts are doing this self-defense, blue belts are doing this self-defense. And I'm like trying to remember what everyone's doing so I can teach it correctly. And then when you're not doing a rotating curriculum, and many of you guys can identify with this, you are spinning 50,000 plates at the same time, because you're going to the blue belts, and then you're going to the purple belts, and then you're going to the green belts. And while you're with the green belts, you're hoping that the blue belts and the purple belts are still practicing and not goofing around or wrestling or being silly. And then as soon as you see this group being silly, you got to run over from your green belt group to go correct the blue belts that are working on their form. And most adults can't even manage that. So a 12-year-old managing that was probably super interesting to watch. I also vividly remember in my first month of teaching, we had a family quit because of one of my classes. And I remember it was a mom with 2 girls that were in the class, and we didn't have class plans. So I was just making shit up as I went along pretty much. And I was like, well, I love playing dodgeball, so I'm like, why don't we just play dodgeball for the last 20 minutes of class? These kids will have a blast. So we play like dodgeball and kickball, obviously nothing to do with martial arts whatsoever. And this mom quit because of it, because she's like, my kids learned nothing today. They played kickball and dodgeball. They can be doing that in PE class. And I thought, like 12-year-old, that was like, everyone had fun, they were laughing, they had a great time, yeah, but they didn't learn shit in that class. So that was like one of the first learning lessons for me, that like fun doesn't mean games. Like fun, that's not the way to go about it. I can't remember if my dad still let me teach like immediately after that or not, or if they just my parents talked to me about it and were like, yo, you can't do this again. But I do remember that sort of prompted my interest in wanting to be a better instructor and really paying more attention and seeking out how to become a better instructor. And I would say like years 14 through 16 was my biggest growth in being an instructor, because I learned how to pull out the energy from a class. And I learned how to create healthy competition within a class where kids wanted to be better than the person next to them without having to shit talk each other. But they see the person next to moving faster, so that would motivate them to start moving faster. And I started to get these little nuances and really put into practice some of the things that I learned from people like Dave Kovar and Melody Schumann when she came to our school, and all of those guys. And I started to put those into practice more, and really started to see that as like, hey, this is something that I actually want to make money doing one day. And I remember my parents, I think as soon as I was of age to get paid, I was paid $3 an hour. That was my starting pay, which I'm pretty sure was below minimum wage at the time. But I was the owner's kids. What am I going to do, right? So I remember teaching at $3 an hour starting off. I think on a good week, I'd make like $45 a week. So balling out hardcore as a kid. And the interesting thing happened when I was probably like around 12 years old. I went to my first NASCA tournament, which was AK Grand Nationals. And fun fact, I just gotten my black belt. So actually I was probably like 11. I just got my black belt. It was my first competition as a black belt. The only tournaments I've done was like a couple of rinky dinky, like small local tournaments. And I go to this NASCA tournament, And I remember I had 9 kids in my division for weapons. And I did this traditional double nunchaku form that we taught at Red Belt at our school. And I remember that NASA calls out 1 through 8. So I'm hearing everyone get called out, and I was the only kid not to get called out to place. So I was 9 out of 9, and they placed 1 through 8. So I was like, oh crap, that sucks. And then the next division was the same 9 kids, and it was like I don't think they had traditional forms back then. I think it was just forms. So you did it open or traditional, and I did traditional form. I did Basai, and I got 9 out of 9 again for Basai. So doing pretty good. Then I was like, sparring. I've placed in sparring at a tournament before, like a local tournament. I have a chance. 4 kids in my sparring division. Guess who got 4th place? This guy. So I was like the worst in every division. But something very important happened at this tournament, because in the ring next to me, I'm hearing the Street Fighter music playing, like sound effects, like Hadouken, like all this stuff. And I look over and I see this guy do a backflip. And like, if you guys remember like martial arts in the 90s, like if you could do 5 jump spin crescent kicks in a row, like you were the shit. Like you were like the baddest man on the planet. You guys know what I'm talking about. And I remember looking over and I see this guy do like a backflip. He goes like split kick, back tuck, pop up front kick. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? Obviously not at age 12. I was like, that's so cool. I want to be that living action figure over there. And that guy in that ring next to me was Mike Chat, which many of you guys have heard of. He won that tournament, obviously. But that was my first exposure to like sport karate and tricking. As soon as I saw Mike Chat perform that next to me, I became so obsessed with open forms, competition, tricking. I think I owned every Black and Blue production video that ever came out. I remember I would watch like, you could buy like the Battle of Atlanta highlights from like 1998. Like they would sell these at tournaments, these VHS tapes. And I remember watching Anthony Atkins, Matt Emig, Kim Do, David Douglas. I was obsessed with David Douglas because I loved his style of his forms. And I would watch these things until the tape pretty much broke. I would play, fast forward, rewind. I would learn their forms. Like I had memorized David Douglas's limb by limb form, if you guys remember that, where he performed it on the stage with the green mats. Like you could, in bylang.com back in the day, I used to watch all the tricking videos on there. And I was a master at rewind, play, slow motion, rewind, play, slow motion on a VHS tape. And then I would go out on the mat and I would try this crazy shit that people were doing in their forms, from trying to break it down from watching like a 1-second clip in their form, trying to do slow motion, adjusting tracking on the the VCR and stuff. And I just remember going out and like just bombing on my face like multiple times. Like to learn a 540, it took me a year because no one taught it. Like no one at our school could trick or throw anything. So I would learn stuff from either watching VHS tapes, or when I actually was able to save enough money to start competing regularly on the NASCA circuit, I would just absorb and have conversations with the other competitors in between our divisions, and I would just be asking them to teach me stuff. Like I remember having Butch Marks like begging him to teach me a butterfly twist, and he got me to think about it a different way that got me to land it like at that tournament. And that was awesome. But all those like little conversations were like learning lessons for me, because this was my opportunity to excel and really grow my craft with martial arts and tricking and stuff. And that sort of became my focus and what I fell in love with. And the funny thing is, I remember my brother would always sign me up for sparring at tournaments. I never wanted to spar, like ever. Like I thought sparring was the dumbest shit when I was a kid. I just wanted to do cool backflips and stuff. And it's funny because I'm exactly the opposite now. But when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was train, like compete martial arts. And there's like, I had some good like tournaments where I was on stage at AK one year and would place like top 3 here and there. I was never like a consistent number 1 guy, even competing in forms. But I remember like my brother would sign me up and I'd place top 3 in fighting every time he would sign me up for fighting. I'd have like 14 to 20 kids in my division, especially bluegrass back in the day. You had like 20 kids was lucky in your division because they weren't sparring the separate boys and girls, but like forms, boys and girls were all together still back in the day. So we had these like giant divisions, sometimes 44 kids. I remember we had one tournament. It was the first tournament I saw Steve Tirada compete at. He was first in the division. It was first tournament he's ever competed. It wasn't ranked yet. He had to go first, and there was 26 kids in the division, and he won first. Like which is unheard of. But all of these like little experiences just gave me a passion to be more involved in martial arts. And I started taking it more serious, like a sport, where I was doing gymnastics and cross training with martial arts. And luckily I was fortunate because Mike Chat was a Naperville, Illinois native. And we would bring him in every opportunity we could to work with our demo team, to do private lessons. So growing up and just having someone like that being able to come in and train, and then even well into my 20s, every opportunity I could, I would go train with someone at Sharky's gym in Naperville, like whether it was Micah Carnes or Craig Henningsen. I got some great Craig Henningsen stories growing up competing together that we'll save for a different day. But the reason I'm sharing all this is like, I grew up in that tournament circuit. I grew up in that tournament world. And obviously, if you guys have been following this podcast, you've sort of seen how my focus on what's important in martial arts has changed drastically since then. One of the things, though, that I will forever remember as to building up a focus in entrepreneurship and sales is one of our students and one of the kids that was on our demo team at the time, his name Jonathan Petroselli, still friends with him to his day, but he was like the best tricker at our school. Like he was the first guy to be twist at our school. He could 540. He was, I think, the first person I ever saw do a 1080. Mike Chat was doing a private lesson with him, and he's like, just try it. And he like landed it, and all of us were like, holy shit, like what was that? But I looked up to him from the tricking perspective because he just was like doing some crazy stuff at the time. And he was also a DJ at the time. And I remember when I was high school, probably like very early in high school, freshman, we had this teenage club in our area. And if you grew up with me, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Zero Gravity is what it was called. It was for 16 and up. And I remember if you were not 18, they would hold your ID. And at midnight, you had to, before midnight, you had to leave. And if not, they'd go on the mic and be like, Adam, your mommy's here to pick you up, like in front of the whole club. So like everyone knew that would happen. So if you were under 16, like you made sure that you were at the front door, like at 11:59 on the dot, because no one wanted to get called out that their parents were picking them up from the club. But I remember I was probably like 15. I wasn't even old enough to get in. And he's like, yo, you should come to this club that I'm DJing at and check it out. So I remember I thought it was like so cool because I was on the guest list of like this teeny bopper club, and I walk in and I remember looking up at the DJ booth and seeing Jonathan up there and just how he controlled the crowd. I was like mesmerized. And I remember telling myself like that exact day, I was like, someday that's going to be me. I'm going to be up there. I'm going to figure out a way. So while I was competing and stuff, I became really obsessed with DJing, and it sort of went hand in hand because I was starting to get really creative with music that I was using for my forms. So I was doing a lot of sound effects, a lot of scratching and stuff in the music for my forms when I was competing. And it just like both those passions sort of meshed together really well. And then I remember in high school, like I was not a popular kid freshman year in high school. And I'll tell you a funny story that sort of started that. So growing up in school, my parents sacrificed a lot to make sure I could go to a private Christian school. My parents weren't even very religious. We didn't go to church or anything. They just, and I think it was my mom pushing it, she just wanted like a better education for me than she got for herself. And I remember they had to cut a check for $3,000. I don't know if that was like semester or year or whatever, but I always remember them talking about it and how that was like it was a pretty big financial strain on them. It wasn't like we didn't have a wealthy family. We were like lower middle class growing up for the most part. So it's not like my parents had all this money, no matter how much my dad would portray it at times. We never were like affluent growing up. And we also weren't like dirt poor either. But I knew that was like something that wasn't easy for them to pay for. And growing up in this private school, when I went to high school, there was no one from my private school that went to high school. A majority of these kids went to a private high school in an area that was like $10,000 a year, which there's no way my parents can afford that, right? So I'm going into a high school where I don't know anyone, coming in from this very like sheltered private school to a public high school, which there's no sheltering at a public high school. Like kids are smoking cigarettes like outside between classes and stuff. People fighting in the bathrooms and like all the craziness that comes with public high school. And I remember my first day, I was so nervous because I didn't know anyone. And my brother pulled like the ultimate troll ever. And I don't even think he knew, but he bought me an outfit to wear for the first day of school. And I wasn't like a fashionable kid at the time, so I didn't know. Like, I wore like the Velcro weightlifting pants my parents would get for Century at wholesale pricing. Like that was usually my outfit, with like a USA Karate shirt. Like most martial arts kids, you're repping the brand. But I remember I go to school and I'm wearing this outfit, and we're in gym class, and it's like the first day of school, so you're not actually like doing anything in gym. They're just talking to you about like rules and dress code and all that stuff, and this kid Artis is sitting next to me, and for the purpose of the story, he's African American. Not that that matters, as my grandma would say. But he's sitting there, and he leans over, and he's like, "Yo," he's like, "Do you know what that stands for?" And I look down, and I have a FB on my shirt, and I have a FB on my shorts, and I was like, "No." He's like, he said it in a non-PC way, but I'm just going to quote him. He's like, "Farmers used to beat us," is what he said, but it means for us, by us, and it's primarily an African-American brand, which I had no idea about. So instantly he's explaining this to me, and like my face is probably just bright red at this point because I'm in a new school. I'm hoping people like me. I hope I make friends. And this dude next to me is like, "Yo, I wouldn't wear that again to school." But luckily Artis ended up being like a great friend throughout high school, and we really connected from that day. He made fun of me for the rest of the 4 years of high school for that single day, which was well deserved. But that was sort of my like intro to high school. So I wasn't a popular kid, and there was two things that really helped me to make friends in high school. First thing was sophomore year, I did the talent show, and I did martial arts. And I brought this kid Tommy with me. That was one of like my main students. He was like 10 years old, and we did a team for him where he was like doing jump kicks off my back and all this stuff. And the crowd erupted at the talent show. And then from then on forward, it was like way easier to make friends, because before that it was like, oh, like you do karate, and then people would make karate noises and do like the Karate Kid pose and shit and make fun of me. But then when they saw me doing tricky and like doing these crazy flips and stuff, all of a sudden it made martial arts cool in the eyes of everyone in high school. The second thing was DJing. So DJing was like a new concept in high school. Not many people DJ'd back in the day. And I remember I made my first like bootleg DJ mix like on CD, and I remember like burning the CDs, putting the paper labels on them, hoping that it wouldn't get stuck in someone's CD player because the paper label is thick, and putting all these together. And I just started handing them out to like anyone in school, like the popular kids. I would go up to them and hand it out. I'm like, "Please like me," type of thing. I was a big people pleaser when I was younger. But what I started to see was the value reciprocation happen, where I was going out of my way to give something for free that I put a lot of time, effort, and energy into, and then seeing other people enjoy it. And then as soon as I give it to them, like I would go in the parking lot later, and I'd hear like my music mix like blasting from their car, and I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." And then they come out to me like, "Yo, when you do another music mix," or they'd be like, "Hey, did you hear DJ Infinity's mix that just came out?" And it was a way for me to connect with a bunch of people through music, essentially. And then I remember at one point, one of my friend's little brothers came out to me, Joe McLaren. And Joe comes up and he's like, "Hey, dude," he's like, "You should sell these, man." And I was like, "I don't think people would buy these music mixes." And he's like, "No." He's like, "Dude, he's like, you should sell them." He's like, "I'll help you sell them if you want." So I was starting to get a little bit more popular DJing. I started DJing at this club called Medusa's in Elgin, Illinois. Actually, it was called Mission at the time. It was called Medusa's after that. But I was DJing at this club, Mission. And I remember I was like, I need to get people to show up. Otherwise, I'm never going to get hired to DJ again. And with DJing culture, when you get hired as a new DJ, guess what time you play? You play like 8 o'clock. Like they put you at the worst possible time when the club is empty. So I was like, I need to pretty much bribe people to get to this place, because like I was just starting to make friends in high school, and I was like, I can't show up to this and not like bring a crowd with me. So I remember I got these DJ Static shirts. Yes, that was my DJ name. I know, like I might regret it a little bit. So I paid this like con artist dude to do a logo for me, and he charged me so much money that I didn't realize it wasn't normal to pay that much for a logo. It was a cool logo. It was like a 3D logo. And then I paid like $25 a shirt to get printed, because I know nothing about how much it should cost to print shirts. But anyway, I started putting out I guess invitations, or like little shitty business cards that I printed off like Avery business card templates, and it said, "Bring this to Mission, and I'm going to hook you up with a free DJ Static shirt and a DJ Static CD." So I gave these cards, and I said, "If you just find me at the club, I will hook you up." I remember there was one point that night, it was right after I got done DJing. I start walking through the club, and like every person has a DJ Static shirt on. It was badass, like everywhere you went. And right away, the owner pulled me in, and I remember I had a really big mess up during my DJ set too. Like it was not a fluid DJ set. And to make it worse, this club, they had the DJ platform elevated, like it was hanging from the ceiling. So you would climb a ladder up with your record box, and then the CD turntables at the time, which were like old school ones, were on these hanging racks. And if you guys know anything about like playing CDs back in the day, you don't want a CD player to move because it skips when it moves. So if anyone like bounces in the DJ booth, like the CD skips essentially. So I remember I was DJing and I pushed too hard, like on the vinyl top of the CD players. I pushed too hard and the song skipped. And I was like, oh shit. And luckily the MC like covered for me and it wasn't a big deal. So I fully thought I was going to go downstairs and get chewed out by the owner for messing up during the set. Come to find out, the owner doesn't care what your DJ set sounds like. He just cares, did he make money off of you being at the club? And I would go downstairs and he goes, you packed this club more than any first DJ we've ever had. And that was like the first experience to marketing for me, where I was like, oh, and it goes back to the value part, right? And I think a lot of us are afraid to give too much value because we feel like we're giving away like our secret sauce. But like just the learning process of, give away free mixes, people want more of it. Give away free t-shirts and free mixes for them to come into the club. They feel part of a community. They feel part of something. They want more of that. And it started to teach me as a teenager this philosophy that Gary Vee preaches down to a T of give away everything for free because they will come back, because they will see you as a source of value. And I lost money that first night DJ, and I think I got paid $50, and maybe we gave out 75 shirts at $25 each. I was using all my money I was making from karate to like put into printing stuff. The CDs I probably lost money on. It's probably like close to $8 to $10 a CD I was losing money on at the time, because I was printing them and burning them myself on my parents' home computer. You know, it would take, like back in the day, to burn a 60-minute CD, it would take 60 minutes to burn each CD. So I would have to wait, and then you'd have burn errors that would happen in the burning of the CD because we were using some shitty software because I didn't have money for good software. So you're dealing with burn errors and all this stuff. It was a pain in the ass. Then I'm all this is happening with the DJ stuff, and my buddy's little brother is like, hey, I'll help you sell these things. I was like, I'm gonna sell these things for like $20 to make money on it. And then I figured out that there was companies that would mass produce CDs for you for like $2.50 a CD as long as you bought 100. Well, me paying for 100 CDs at $2.50 was cheaper than me doing like the way I was doing for doing 25 CDs. So I was like, well, that's a no-brainer. So I was like, there's got to be a way to make money of this just besides like being paid $50 to DJ for an hour. So what happened is I got this idea to go with one of these companies, and I was like, I'm going to print, I think I did 250 CDs the first time I decided to do this, which for me was like a lot because I was like, I don't even know if I could sell 50 if I was selling them at this point. And I remember my buddies would come over. We would sit there. We'd have all these blank CD cases. We'd have the CDs that were printed. We'd have the inserts for like the track listing and the cover. And we'd be assembly lining these CDs and putting them together. And then I made this deal with them that I was like, hey, let's sell these for $15, and you guys keep $5 from every CD. I'll get $10. So what happened is I remember going to high school that week, and my friend's little brother said he would sell them, and I had no idea if these kids were going to sell these or if they were going to steal them and keep all the money. I had no clue. It's like, we're figuring this shit out as we go. So I remember like someone came up to me and was like, dude, I just heard your CD. He's like, can I buy a copy off of you? And I was like, where did you hear my CD? And he's like, oh, so-and-so has it. And then I'm like, well, how did so-and-so get it? And sure enough, I remember this Joe comes up to me and he hands me like $50. And he's like, dude, I just sold 5 CDs. Here you go. And I was like, whoa, you can make $50 that fast? $50 was a lot of money for me. Remember, I was making like $3 to $5 an hour, maybe teaching classes at the time. So I get $50, and that was like the first time that I was like, oh, like this could be a business. This could be like something that actually makes money. And I remember that, like, if we fast forward, maybe we won't go too far, but probably from that first 250 CDs, I think we sold 200 of them. which having 50 left over, I just used to give away when I was like DJing at the clubs. We literally would throw CDs in the audience, probably cut some people with like the edges of those cases. But we give them away and everyone would go crazy anytime we give away CDs. So we just use those extra 50 to do self-promotion essentially. But then I started like realizing like, oh, you can make money like selling these CDs. I'm paying $250, I'm selling them for $15. Awesome. So then I find out that in Chicago, it's weird. This is like show you how weird the early 2000s and late 90s are. There used to be these body jewelry kiosks in the malls that would sell like belly button rings and like nose rings and like whatever. And it was all like cheap ass like China jewelry that they sold for like $20 a pop. But they would sell like DJ CDs at a lot of these different like little body jewelry places. So I remember there was Eternal Body Jewelry and Iguana Body Jewelry were the two that would sell CDs. So I remember walking in the mall with like a box of CDs and I'm like, I don't even know how to start this conversation. I'm just going to pitch it. So I go to the first one, which I think was an Iguana Body Jewelry, and the guy working there, he's like, we'll buy 5 CDs. And he's like, if they sell, then I'll call you and you'll bring back more. And there was no texting back in the day. This was like still, I think the Nextel Chirp phone was like how we communicated, where you'd like walkie-talkie each other. And I remember at the time, I think I had just started DJing at that Zero Gravity club that I saw my buddy John working in. And I would just start to make a name for myself in Chicago as a DJ, like very early on. And I remember like a week later, I get a call from this guy and he's like, hey, we sold 5. He's like, we'll take 25 now. So I was like, cool. And then I started finding all these little CD stores and like these DJ stores that would sell vinyl for DJs that also sold the mix CDs as well. And all of a sudden I realized like, oh, you could move like 500 CDs if you go through enough channels. So if I go to the record stores, some of them will sell them. If I go to the body jewelry places, they'll sell them. And then I started to have this network of like 5 kids from different high schools that would literally in between classes go through the hallways and sell my CDs. And they'd keep $5, they'd give me 10. And so I remember they would just pull up in my driveway. They would come up with like a box of whatever leftover CDs they have. They'd hand me cash. I'd give them cash back for what they did. And it started to become like this little side hustle of us just selling these bootleg mix CDs that I'm making in my basement at my house, essentially. And that is really what got me really interested in marketing and being an entrepreneur. Is the first time you get money for something that you love doing, I was like, this is pretty cool. And it was self-sufficient. My parents weren't helping me with it. It was like I sort of figured this out on my own, or at least I felt like I did at the time. So fast forward with the DJing picture, I started getting residencies in Chicago where I'm getting to DJ like weekly at the same spot. Start making a little bit more money. DJs still didn't get paid that much unless you're like a big name like Tiesto type Bad Boy Bill DJ in Chicago was the big one back in the day. So I wasn't making great money, but like I'd make like a few $100s a week DJing like 3 nights a week, 2 or 3 nights a week. And I just saw like the camaraderie of the culture of the people being there. Like everyone hung out with each other. Everyone looked out for each other. And then there's also like the same vein, like competitiveness happening, because you didn't want anyone to like get a better crowd response than you when you DJ'd. Also, like this was back in the day of vinyl mostly when new songs were released. So like once in a while you'd find a vinyl that would get the club going crazy that no one else knew where you got it from. And that was like secret sauce back in the day. Like, oh, we're not sharing this song with anyone. Like, and then when you'd play it at clubs, like people knew it was you because they knew you were the only one that had that vinyl, or like one of the few people that had that vinyl to play. And it was like this cool introduction to entrepreneurship and just sort of hustling. And all while this is going on, I'm teaching full time for my dad at the same time. And I remember I would DJ Friday night. The club closed at 4 a.m, like this teen club. So there was a lot of times I would DJ till 2, 3, or 4 o'clock. I would drive to my dad's school, which was about 45 minutes away. I would sleep in my car in the parking lot because Saturday morning classes started at 9. The school opened at 8:30. So I'd sleep in my car, or I'd go in the school and sleep on the couch in my dad's office. I would get like 3.5 hours of sleep. I'd wake up, teach classes from 8:30 to like, we'd have black belt club meetings and all that stuff on Saturday. So I'd get out there like 3 or 4. I would go home, shower, change, drive right to the club, DJ again till 4 a.m. And then I would sleep like 19 hours on Sunday and then teach all week and then do the same thing. Also, while I was doing this, I was training in gymnastics like 2 hours a day, 5 days a week as well. So I miss that energy that I had at that age, which is cool. But all of this was like, this is how I learned to market. This is how I learned to create value propositions. This is how I learned to sell, to be able to explain how a DJ mix of Euro music, 140 beats per minute, is going to be a good purchase for someone is a hard sell. Like, you learn to sell pretty good at that when you're selling that. And then when I was 16 is like when my life got turned upside down. That's when my mom passed away from cancer. And my mom was like the foundation for me. She taught me my values. She taught me work ethic, all that stuff. So losing her and going through that was tough, but it was also probably one of the best things for me. Because when you're like in sort of like DJ culture, club culture, it is so easy to just be super immature, which I obviously was at this time. Her passing made me grow up really fast. Because my dad and I didn't really have a good relationship at this time. So like the mentor, the main mentor in my life was gone now. I was like, oh, I got to start figuring out some stuff on my own and start like really navigating life. So I became way more hustle focused, because I was like, I need to make money. I need to get my own place. I need to move out. And then when I was 18, I was in the rebellious period of my life and was not getting along with my dad. And I decided that I'm going to test my marketing prowess and throw a house party at my house. And we charged, I'm going to see if I can remember this correctly. Well, first of all, I remember we got kicked out of a nightclub because we were passing flyers for my house party at the nightclub. And we had a DJ lineup of like 8 DJs for my house party, like well-named DJs, like from all of Chicago. And I was like, if I pay these DJs and get them at my party, I know people will come just to see the DJs. So that was the mentality. And we charged $15 for every guy, and then we charged $5 for every female. And I had my friends as security. We all had I grabbed the walkie-talkies from my dad's school with the headsets. We all had these walkie-talkies and headsets, and we had this party of like 200 high school kids show up. It got busted by the cops at midnight, so it lasted really, really long. And then I got kicked out of my house like shortly after that when my dad got back home from being out of town. So for a good year, I was couch surfing. I was staying at my buddy Joe's house. I was staying at my buddy Ben's house. I was also getting kicked out of multiple houses because of how bad I snore. The parents were getting frustrated with me living there. So I was just going from time to time. And then at one point I was like, enough is enough. I'm going to figure out how to get an apartment. So I saved some money, ended up getting an apartment, and it was my first time figuring out bills. I remember our water got shut off multiple times because I didn't remember to pay the bill, or didn't know I had to pay a water bill. Like, I didn't read my mail. We just like throw it in a pile on the community table in the thing. I remember we had people over one time, and our power got cut for not paying the power bill. So I remember I was like so embarrassed because I was like, everyone's going to know I didn't pay the power bill. So I was like, I wonder if the whole complex is out. I was like, I'm going to go check the breaker board. I didn't even know where the breaker board went, but I remember there was a utility closet outside with an outlet. So I took an extension cord, plugged it in that outlet, brought it in through the apartment, and we just started plugging everything into a power strip so we could still have music and TV and the refrigerator going and stuff. So that was just like a good like responsibility learning process. I got my first credit card and was super excited, and was under the mindset of credit cards are free money. I remember I had a $1,500 limit, and I remember I accumulated a balance of $5,000 on a card with a $1,500 limit, not realizing that I had to pay it back. And there was this thing called interest. And I remember it was also the first time I ever got sent to collections. And I learned about collections and credit. And here's the crazy thing, guys. Like, I was so bad at this younger that I remember my credit score at one point was 525. Like, that's a shit credit score, being at 525. All right, so we're going through this phase. All during this, I'm really developing in the background as actually a really good martial arts instructor. It's become my passion. I'm obsessed about learning more about martial arts. Start studying like Roland Osborne at the time. And I just knew martial arts and DJing were my things. I want to do something with music. I want to do something with martial arts. And it came to the point where my dad and I had such a bad relationship that I just had to step away from the business. And it was a 50-50. I was a stubborn, immature, like young kid. And then my dad also is not the best parent at this point in his life. So I stepped away from the martial arts industry and I was like, I'm going to go get a job. I'll show him, like typical, like young 20-year-old mentality. So the first job I got offered, or it wasn't, I don't even know I was offered. One of my DJ friends was working at this. He was working at ASU Online University. And I was like, oh, he's like, I'm an admissions advisor. He's like, dude, they pay you $42,000 a year. And I was like, hell yeah. And a 19-year-old making $42,000, I thought I was balling until I realized how much gets taken out of your check for taxes and all that other stuff. So I remember going there, crush the interview, and find out you're cold calling people for trying to get them into an online university that has zero accreditation, which is that's the funnest job ever. And all their leads came from, if you guys remember this back in the early days of internet, you get like a pop-up ad. It'd be like, win a free iPad. And then you have to go through and answer all these questions and give your information. And then at the end, you still don't win an iPad. We would get those leads. So we got leads for people that wanted to win something for free, not even interested in schooling. And then we would call them up and have to try and sell them on signing up for college when all they wanted was a free iPad. Those are the best cold call leads ever, as you guys can imagine. And if we didn't make 300 calls a day, it was considered not hitting your quota. So we had a headset and it would just go down the line, call after call after call. They record your calls, all that stuff. And it sucked. It was a terrible job. Everyone there hated their life. Like, no joke. There was a lot of backstabbing between management to try and like get ahead of each other. There really wasn't any good leadership in the company. And it was my first like thrown into the real world corporate America of like, yo, this is what it's really like out here. And then I went from there to, I wanted to be a mortgage broker because I had a friend at the time that was making good money. And I remember my first month being a mortgage broker, I got hired as a commission only job. Commission only, you got no salary. So it was only based on your deals. And when you first are a mortgage broker, your direct superior got like 25% of your commissions, or 50, I don't remember, 25 or 50%. And I remember my first big month, I got a $10,000 check and it was all commission. And I was like, holy cow. I was like, you can make real money doing this. And I was probably 21 or 20 at the time. And I remember because I was DJing downtown and I wasn't even old enough to like drink at the clubs I was DJing at. But the mortgage broker business, it was like a hustle. Like it was subprime mortgages, if you guys remember those days. And like it was, you were fighting to get the best leads. And if you got like top 50, no, not even top, it was like top 20% of sales, you would get these, they call them the red line leads. And there was this red phone that would ring and people would rush to pick it up because these were the good leads. These were leads that like came from a radio ad or came from, they would send out direct mail, and these were like direct mail leads. So they were like better leads than what everyone else got, which were the old leads that had been called a million times. So I remember when my first $10,000 a month, they're like, dude, you're going to be on the red line list. And we'd rotate through leads on the red line. And now all of a sudden, instead of cold calling people that don't want to talk to me and having to dial 200 times to get one pickup, it was, oh, mortgage industry. Now these people, it's like, you only need to call 3 of these leads and you get one on the phone. Like, this is a way better quality leads. So I started to understand the difference in lead quality during this time as well. And then I just really started to hone my sales skills. And I remember a lot of the people that worked at this company with me were former car salesmen. Like they all like inhabited the mortgage realm. And I also, as my first dive into very unethical sales, because I saw people promising things to clients that they knew they couldn't follow up with, that they couldn't actually support what they were promising. And I just remember seeing like people's lives shattered almost from these empty promises. And pretty much the promise that a lot of people at our mortgage company would do is they would pitch what was called, in their terms, a bridge loan, which is not an actual bridge loan, but they would say someone would come in and they would want to refinance or something. So they would say, hey, we want to get you a lower rate, but to get you a lower rate, we have to pay off your debt. So what we recommend is we're going to pull equity out of your house, use that to pay off the debt. Your credit score is going to jump up. And then in 6 months, we're going to refinance you. And because you have a higher credit score, you're going to get a way lower rate on your mortgage, which all sounds like it makes sense. Like higher credit rate, lower interest rate makes sense, right? Well, the problem is a lot of these guys, and this would across the entire industry, not even just at this office, they would sell that pitch. And then as they're pulling out money to pay off like this person's debt, they're also pulling extra equity at the last minute before closing and paying it to themselves as points on the refinance loan. And then in 6 months, when that person would come back wanting to refinance, there's no equity in their house because it got pulled off as commission to the mortgage broker. So it was super shady. And I saw people doing this in the office I was working in. And that was like my first like crossroad, like the fork in the road of, all right, I can do what one of my bosses was doing at the time, where he was getting $24,000 checks weekly, but he was also promising the moon to these people and then ghosting them 6 months later when they'd follow back up. Or I could keep doing it the way I was doing it and be making less than like the top people. But I was okay with that. Like $10,000 for a 21-year-old in a month is pretty damn good, right? And I think my rent at the time was like $500. So it was like I had this extra money. We'll talk about Adam's lack of financial management and keeping that money later. But that, not only did I get sales, but I was shown the difference between this is how to make a lot of money, but also lose your soul. And this is how to make the right amount of money and still feel good about yourself when all is said and done. And I went that route. And then after a while, I missed martial arts. Like I missed training. I missed competing. I missed teaching. To me, the mortgage money was good, but it had zero fulfillment whatsoever. Like if I would have got fired from my job, I probably wouldn't have even cared. Besides the money part, I would have been like, all right, whatever. And I sort of missed like seeing the before and after progress of the kids that I used to teach in martial arts. And I really miss like having a direct impact on people's lives. So then I ended up moving away from the mortgage industry because I was just getting really, really uncomfortable with the amount of unethical sales happening. And even though I wasn't doing it, it just seemed like all my bosses were at the time. And I was like, there's no good influence here at all. And I don't feel like I had anything I could further learn from them because I can't even say what they were doing in sales because they were just lying to people. It wasn't like selling. It wasn't persuasion. It was just like, let me just tell you whatever you want to hear so we get money from you. And at that point I was like, I just need a stable job. So I went to work at a bank, and it wasn't even a good bank. It was like a bank in a grocery store, like one of those shitty banks. TCF was the name of the bank. And I remember just working that job while I was still DJing, and I think I was making $36,000 a year at that bank. And I was an assistant manager. No, I was a supervisor. I was a supervisor at the bank making $36,000. Hated my job. Like our Christmas bonus, they gave us a frozen turkey. That was a Christmas bonus, which my wife's family was super ecstatic about because we got free turkey for Thanksgiving. But it was just like no trajectory. There was multiple people stealing money from the bank and getting caught stealing money, like just pulling out extra money from their drawer and stuff during transactions. It was like, and there was just no supervision or anything like that. And I remember I missed martial arts so much that my brother had just opened up his school with his wife at the time. And I'm like, let me just hit up Jason. I'm like, I don't even think he can afford to pay me, but let me see if there's any opportunity for me to get back in martial arts. I'm like, I just want to be in martial arts again. So I remember meeting with them at a breakfast place, my brother and sister-in-law, and we had talked on the phone first, and they're like, we're going to give you what we can offer you. And they're like, we just want to give you a heads up. It's not close to what you're making now. And I was like, I just need $3,000 a month. Like if I can make $36,000 at the time, I'll be good. It was $1,200 a month is what they could offer me for full-time work, which I don't think was legal at the time, but I don't know. But I just missed martial arts so damn much that I was like, yeah, I'll do it for $1,200. Like they could have offered me $500. I probably still would have said yes at the time just because I wanted to be back doing martial arts. And then the one thing that my brother was great at in his school was really curriculum development. Like he had too much curriculum like everyone else at the time. but he did rotating curriculum. He was one of the first people I ever saw doing class plans, like super detailed class plans. And he really helped me to understand curriculum development and how important using class plans were, which also got me interested in how do we do that for the business side, because we were growing steadily at the time. I think at the peak, that school was doing $42,000 a month, which back in the day was like pretty damn good for a martial arts school. And my goal at that time, like we had some different like phone call scripts and stuff, and that was pretty much all the systems. And then I remember John Cassidy did some top kick thing that my brother went to, and my brother and sister came back with a daily operations checklist. And this was like the first like systemized piece of anything besides a class plan I saw in a martial arts school. So shout out to John Cassidy for like really, in my opinion, sort of leading the way on that. And I was like, this makes sense. Like, why didn't anyone else think of this? And I remember at the bank, we had opening and closing procedures. You had to have 2 people close, 2 people open. So there was accountability that really didn't happen, but whatever. So I started thinking back to that, and I was like, oh, the bank actually had everything systemized, just no one followed the systems. That was the problem. So I'm like, how do we take similar things and start putting them into place in the school? And one of the first ways we did that was with Parents Nights Out. I came up with like flyers and was diving into graphic design. And then we had a Parents Night Out where I couldn't run it because I was sick or something, and there was no other available instructors to run it. And I remember the only person that could run it was the girl working the front desk who has no teaching experience. And it is the day of this Parents Night Out. And I'm like, how do I get her to run a Parents Night Out and not have it be pure chaos? So I remember I wrote up a class plan for the Parents Night Out, super detailed, walking through everything. I took pictures of all the games and stuff. I shot videos for her of how to run it. Excuse me. And I remember I was at home and I was like in my room, in my bedroom or living room or something. And I was just like filming on this like shitty Razor phone that had the worst camera ever. And I'm trying to send her these videos and stuff. Or maybe I was using like a digital camera at the time. I don't remember, but somehow we got it to her. And she was like, that was so easy. I was like, whoa. I was like, I didn't even really have to like train you besides giving you a class plan and like the videos on run things, and people loved the Parents Night Out and had a great time. So that's when I started to figure out like, oh, this could be a thing. And I started making like almost a done for you Parents Night Out that anyone on our team could run. And I didn't like doing Parents Nights Out that much, like actually running them at the time. So I was like, if I could pass this off to someone else and delegate this, awesome. And it started to teach me that, hey, when you have systems and you train people on systems, you can then give other people that job and you don't have to do it anymore. And that was like a light bulb for me. I was like, oh, so I can stick to teaching and doing what I love and not necessarily have to be there Friday nights or Saturday nights, whenever we ran it, doing Parents Nights Out. And then I remember talking to Nick D at Team Perella. And I remember talking to him about this Parents Night Out thing I did. And like, I have to give him credit because it was his idea. He's like, you should just like do it and give it away for free and just see what the response is. Because I wasn't thinking about like selling these or anything like this. So I remember I put together a Pokemon Parents Night Out because Pokemon Go, the app, just came out and that was super popular. And Nick was also the first one to introduce me to doing a webinar. And I remember I did a call, and I want to say there's maybe 15 people on the call, like school owners, and I gave all of them a free Pokemon Parents Night Out. And the feedback was amazing from it. Like everyone was like, this was the first Parents Night Out we sold, or this was so easy to run. Everything was laid out and done for you. We had all the marketing materials. We had the Facebook image and all that stuff. And when I saw the response to it and started having other people reaching out to me about Parents Nights Out, I was just like, well, could this be a business? Could this be its own thing? And I was probably doing everything wrong at the time. So then I launched the Parents Night Out thing. And around the same time, I was making music mixes for our martial arts school. Because what I hated was like, there's so many good songs I want to play that I couldn't play because of all the curse words and all that stuff in it. So I started personally making DJ mixes for our school where I'd edit out every suggestive lyric and curse word possible. And then I remember, I think Jotty came to our school for a seminar, and we're like playing Biggie during class or something, like a hip hop mix. And he's like, I see like keep looking over at the music, like waiting for a curse word to happen. And then he's like, yo, I was gonna tell you, like, you start playing that. And I was like, how's he gonna play this song like with all these kids on the mat? And he's like, it was cool. He's like, it was edited and everything. He's like, where'd you get that? And I was like, oh, I made it. And he's like, that's pretty cool. He's like, that you can play that type of music. And that started giving me an idea for the Level Up Music app. And I just remember it wasn't even a business at the time, but I remember I was in college class at College of DuPage, and I'm sitting in, it was a science class, and science is my least favorite topic. I could care less about science at the time. And I had this teacher that like drove me crazy because she was like the most out of shape person on the planet, and she would talk about health all the time. And I'm just like walking contradiction. But I remember being in that class, and I have my notebook out, and I'm essentially just writing my version at the time of a business plan for Level Up Music. And I'm sitting there writing, and I'm like, all right, I can charge this if I get this many clients. And then all of a sudden I figured that if I did it right, I can make $10,000 a month. And I remember I closed my notebook, I got up, and I walked out of class right in the middle of her talking. And it wasn't even like her back to me. Like I just got up and left, and she said something to me while I was leaving. I didn't even pay attention. I just left because I was like, I have the secret ingredient. I have this thing. I'm going to do this. So then I launched Level Up, not as an app, but as like, I would send you customized music mixes for your school, and I charge $100 a month, and I had 4 clients when I launched. And I remember bringing back Nick D. I remember being on a phone call with Nick D and him talking about doing business coaching with him. And I remember I got my first 4 clients, but I think I only had $200 in my account at the time. And he's like, if you're going to do this coaching, it's $199 a month. And I just like jumped on a whim, and I was like, screw it. I'm like, let's do it. I was like, I want to learn. I want to grow. It's crazy because as scary as that was, and having $1 in my bank account at the time, being able to grow that, where I think at the peak of Level Up, it was doing like $36,000 a month on parents' nights out kits. Like, believe it or not, like that's, to this day, that sounds like the most insane thing ever to me. But we got it to doing $36,000 a month at one point. And this is still when I was teaching part-time at my brother's school. And I was like, holy shit, like you can take a digital product and sell it to people. And it's not even a product that they need. Like no one needs a parents' night out kit. It just makes people's lives easier. It's a convenience, really. And I was like, you can make real money with this thing. Like, who the hell would have thought about this? And it's funny because as I started growing Level Up, like I got really obsessed with ClickFunnels and Russell Brunson. I remember, again, I was at college, and it was Columbia College this time in Chicago. And I remember I had a class starting at 9:00, and I was like a straight A student at Columbia. My second time back to college as like a 24-year-old, 25-year-old, I was like the best student in every single class. Like I was all in on college. But I opened up .com Secrets by Russell Brunson. And I remember he was teaching the value, the ladder, or the ascension ladder, whatever you want to call it, which shows like free tripwire offer, upsell, and then it's sort of laying out really how to best sell digital products. And I remember having my laptop at the time, and I go to clickfunnels.com, and I watched like the little video on the website, and I was like, I could build my own like marketing funnel. Like I could do it, and it's $99 a month or $199 a month, whatever it was at the time. And I wasn't making $36,000 at this time, but I was probably doing like $14,000 a month with me being the only employee. And I had Scotty at the time, who was like a part-time, like, I don't know, I paid Scotty $500 a month to like do like some BS work. But I remember reading this book and then going on the website, and I was like, I'm not going to class today. I was like, screw this. Like I just found like the secret to like selling digital products. Like this is the greatest thing ever. And probably within the next 24 hours, I read the entire .com Secrets book. Like I was obsessed with it. Then I started like studying his copy style. I started buying all of his books when he had like the 500 split test book that shows you like the green button performs better than the blue button on the page and all this stuff. Like I became obsessed with the data of it, the tracking of it, everything. And that's really when Level Up started to take off and really got like to the $20,000 mark, $25,000, $36,000 mark. And this was all like running out of my apartment at the time. Like I had just had my first son. My wife and I were like new parents living together. Part of the time, my mother-in-law was living with us in this apartment. And I'm trying to figure out being a dad. I'm trying to figure out running my own business. I was going to school full-time while I was running this business and while I was still teaching martial arts part-time. So I was sleeping never like 3-4 hours a night probably. And I even remember I'd drive home from college and I would wake up like while I was driving, like on the way home. And luckily, like somehow by the grace of God, I was still behind the wheel, like in a lane somehow. But there was multiple times that I would catch myself falling asleep, and I would be like, windows down, windows up, air on, heat on, air on, heat on. I'd be slapping myself in the face to just stay awake through that. But I was so focused on creating a business and building a future for my little 2-year-old at the time. None of that mattered. Like in the moment, 4 hours sleep, whatever. I would show up. Oh, and on top of that, I was working at Starbucks part-time as well, because I didn't have health insurance through my business. I didn't have health insurance through teaching part-time. So I'd work the mornings at Starbucks from 6 a.m. till 12, serving up drinks and doing a shitty job at it, most likely. So I had all of that happening at once, and then this business, the level up, started to take off, and that was sort of the out from Starbucks for me, the out from teaching at a martial arts school. And then I remember while I'm doing that, I was doing coaching with Nick still, and something happened with the graphic designer at Team Perella, at Perella Consulting. Either they're too busy, they quit, got fired. I don't remember what it was, but Nick was seeing a lot of the posts that I was doing. I also had a vlog following me around. I hired some college intern to follow me with a camera. This kid named Kevin. It's probably still on YouTube. Is he on YouTube still, or no? Did we take it down? Thank God we took it down. It was probably cringe if I went back and watched it now. But I was in the wanting to be Gary V phase of my life, where we're going to have a camera, we're going to document everything, blah, blah, blah. So I had this vlog following me around too. I'm starting this business, and I remember I think Nick reached out from Team Perella, and he's like, hey, we're in a bind. Can we use your graphic designer? He's like, who does your graphics? And I was like, well, I do all my graphics. I was pretty much self-taught at this time. And he's like, can you do a graphic for this? And then I started doing free graphic design for Perella Consulting, helping them out. Because at this point in my life, Nick had helped me a lot with business advice. He had given me some great advice for growing Level Up. Regardless of what our relationship looks like now, I can't take that away from him in any sense of he taught me a lot, definitely. So I remember I was doing graphic design for them and everything. And then Perella was doing this thing called Growth Academy that they were launching. And I remember Nick was like, hey, he's like, I'll pay you X number of dollars if you, for every Growth Academy person, you get to sign up for this thing. And I remember I did pretty good selling this thing. At that time, I think I had 20 school owners that I got personally to sign up for Growth Academy, something close to that. And then also at this time, I want to say Nick brought up the idea of going to New York and moving out there to work for Perella Consulting. And the thing was, they didn't even have a job at Perella Consulting for me. They were getting ready to launch a software called Studio Boss, and they wanted me to be the customer service manager for that, which guess how much customer service experience Adam had at this time. I had dealing with Level Up clients. That was it at this time. So I remember Nick called me and he's like, hey, we'll pay you $60,000 a year. You can still keep doing your Level Up thing. And to me, it wasn't so much about what I was going to get paid or even what I was going to do there. At this time, Team Perella was sort of at their height, and we're the people doing things differently in the martial arts industry. And at the time, they also just had a more authentic feel than other coaching programs in the martial arts industry. I was just like, well, this is an opportunity for me to just go learn. They're at a scale higher than the company that I'm currently running for myself. I can go there and just absorb knowledge. I also knew that Michael Perella at the time had a really strong network of high-level entrepreneurs, because I'd seen them do Facebook Lives with Joe Polish and Cameron Harold and some of those guys that I looked up to at the time. So I was like, oh, that I want to be around that culture. I want to be around that experience. I remember my wife did not want to move to New York, not even a little bit. And after Nick and I first had this initial conversation about going to work for Perella Consulting, I was 100% yes, but I wasn't going to do it without my wife obviously being 100% yes as well. And she was a giant hell no at the beginning, because her entire family is in Chicago, as well as mine. Her relationship with her family was much stronger than mine. and she was definitely more rooted there. And I remember it sort of took like me jumping on a call with Nick and his wife, and Nicole really, Nick's wife, Nicole, really is the one that sold it to my wife, about going and moving out there and explaining about the company and about living in New York and all of this stuff, because there was just so much unknowns. And we were literally moving from Chicago to New York and moving halfway across the country with our whole family, not knowing what to expect. And so my wife, like, God bless her, had faith in me and decided, yes, like, I'm going to be supportive. And we made a deal because she was working at Kate Spade, like the clothing company at the time, because she had a background in fashion design. She was a visual merchandiser, which meant she would really pattern out the stores and like how all the handbags and stuff were laid out in the stores. She would go help open new locations and make sure that everything like was displayed correctly according to like their brand guides or whatever they have. So she had a good job. All the higher ups at Kate Spade loved her and saw like a really bright future. And I think she could have gone to the moon with that if she wanted and been like as high up as she wanted at Kate Spade. But I also saw just the passion she had for being a mom and just how much love she had for our son at the time. And the deal was, she's like, we're going to move to New York, but she goes, I'm only going to do if you can figure out a way for me to be a stay-at-home mom. Because she's like, I want to be there with the kids. I want to spend time with it. She came up in a split family, so she didn't get the same like parent time that people that grow up in like a two-parent household get, because she would have weekends with one parent and so forth. So for her, having that constant time with the kids was super important. So I figured it out, and I was like, all right, well, what I pay myself from Level Up and like the salary I get from Perella, I think we can pull this off. So we flew out to New York for a week, and I remember we're looking at houses and stuff. And we were sort of looking for a house like in the $3,000 like range, $2,500, $3,000, which in New York, like good freaking luck. It's hard. And all of them were like small, didn't have enough bedrooms, whatever. And we had, I think my wife was pregnant at the time too with Oliver, or we just had Oliver, I think, before we moved to New York. Yeah, we just had him before. So we have a baby too, and like a 2-year-old at the time. And I remember... And as much as Nick helped me, this was like some terrible advice. And I don't think it was like necessarily Nick's fault because I listened to it. But I remember we went out to Lux Cafe or Cafe Lux in New York with Nick and his wife. And we're all sitting there and he's like, how's the house hunting going? I'm like, well, it's tough. Like, we're trying to find this place. I'm like, we found this amazing place in Long Beach, but it's like $4,500 a month in rent. And we are coming from Chicago where we were paying $1,800 a month, like in the suburbs of Chicago. So to me, that's like unfathomable. It was beautiful house. It was 2 blocks from the beach in Long Beach, a little surfer town, and like the town and everything. Like if I could snap my fingers and automatically live there, it'd be a yes. And then Nick had this like advice he gave me, which to this day I don't know if it was good or bad advice, because I definitely learned something from it, but I don't know if it was a good lesson or not. But he's like, Adam, he's like, you need to move into the $4,500 a month place that you want to live in, because he's like, it's gonna force you to hustle harder, because he's like, it's gonna make you uncomfortable. My wife did not want to move in there, and I remember that, like, this is stupid financial like lesson for Adam. I remember I didn't realize like the first and last month plus security deposit thing. So like that's $15,000. And then I also didn't realize we had to pay the realtor. I was like, thought something magic happened where the other person paid the realtor, and the realtor charged like a month. Like, so like if you got in a $4,500 house, you had to pay the realtor $4,500. So I get the bill from the realtor first, and I was like, we got to pay another $4,500. I was like, holy shit. So I remember paying $4,500, and I think we had like $10,000 in our account at the time. So I'm like, all right, at least we'll be able to pay like first and last month. Like, we'll be okay, and then I'll get my first check from Perella, and we'll be good. And we got the first month of rent bill from the landlord, and it's $15,000 because it's like first, last, and security. And I pulled out my entire like 401k at the time that I had from when I worked at the bank, and from the I think Starbucks contributed to it as well. And I remember emptying the whole thing, and I was like, I'm gonna have to pay taxes on this too. And I'm like, oh, this is gonna suck. And I remember my wife panicking because she's like, this is such a bad way to start life in New York. Anyway, we paid it. And it was $4,500 a month. And the whole concept of it's going to make you hustle harder, in theory, might have been a good concept. But like listening back, I would never give anyone that advice. Did it make me hustle harder? Absolutely. But it also made me like sacrifice family time and time with family to hustle harder. And the work ethic taught when I was in New York, it was hustle culture, 100%, like 100% hustle culture. And at the time, you got to remember, I was like following Gary Vee and Russell Brunson, who are also like hustle culture at the time. Like I remember when I first like screen like savers on my phone was a Gary Vee quote that it said hustle mode on. And it was like, oh, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, it doesn't matter if you need to work weekends, or it doesn't matter if everyone else leaves at 5, you're staying until 9 until this shit gets done. And while Nick and Michael like didn't necessarily like make me stay like late or anything, I just sort of picked up that like that's what was expected. Like that was the vibe I got. So I don't even necessarily blame them for that. I think that was more of like me either misinterpreting what I saw, or just like maybe just wanting to perform and impress so much that I was like, oh, I'm just gonna I'll be the last one to leave the office every night. I don't give a shit. Like and that was like when I was at I Love Kickboxing, everyone left before me. Like the C-level people most nights were leaving before me, because I just knew that if I out hustled and outworked everyone, like I would be irreplaceable for the company, which that also happened. But working there, it was a storm of like great and shit at the same time, if I have to be honest. The hustle culture stuff definitely put a strain on my marriage at the time, combined with my wife going through postpartum depression and me not realizing she was going through postpartum depression. It just like it did not put us in a good spot, but I will take responsibility for being the ignorant husband that was hustle culture and not paying attention to my wife's like mindset or needs at the time. But the good of it came out of being exposed to just things outside the industry, which is what I'd wanted like since the beginning. It was sort of what we tied into the beginning of this podcast. Michael was the first one to take me to a high level mastermind. Like I would have never experienced the War Room Mastermind if Michael didn't take a leap of faith and allow me to go. I remember when Nick left Perella, I sort of like had a choice to make, right? Do I go with Nick and Aka and go do this winterboard thing that they're doing? Like, to be honest, Nick was like family to me. Like my kids called him Uncle Nick. Like we were really close with him and Nicole, like while we were at Team Perella. And like I loved the dude like a brother at this time. And it's like the first time I've ever talked about this like in public. And I remember it was such a tough decision for me. And because like you got to remember, I just had my third child at this time. So we have 3 kids, all under all 3 and under. Like pretty much like, or 4 and under at the time. So I have these kids and I'm having to weigh like loyalty with Nick and providing for my family essentially, because even though Nick and Aqua were leaving with Winterborn, I want to say I was doing maybe $40,000 a month at the time. Yes, I had Level Up still going at the time, like relatively strong. But I was like, I don't know if that growth is going to be there in the next couple of years for me to be able to provide for my family the way I want to provide for my family. And I'll give it to Nick. Like when I talked to Nick and just expressed my concern, he even told me, I remember, I think it was a phone, I don't know if it was a phone call or we were at dinner or something, but he's like, hey man, he's like, there's no hard feelings if you stay there, because he's like, you have to do what's best for your family. And I remember like appreciating him saying that. And it was, to me, it sort of felt like his way of giving me permission to stay and with Michael, work with Michael. And the weird thing was like my first year there, I never saw Michael. Like Michael was never in the office. So I didn't really have any relationship with Michael that at that time, besides him coming up to me at the last membership summit and just saying he was really impressed with me and I did a good job organizing stuff. And that was pretty much like the only conversation we had up to this point. But when Michael discovered Nick was leaving, then Michael started to really make sure that he'd always stop at my desk and have conversations with me. And I'll give him, he did really good future pacing me. Like he really did a great job of painting the picture of what it would mean to stay and work there. And so I sort of took over Perella Consulting at this time, which was at this time was already a shell of its former self. They didn't handle the last MABs really well, and a lot of I remember this was probably my like second week at that company. I was handling mastermind cancellations like my second week at the company, and I think that second week we probably had 18 people cancel from the mastermind because they didn't feel like there's any importance put on them for the last MABs. They felt like the previous MABs they were like taken care of and extra things were done for them, and then this one it was just sort of like whatever, you don't get any extra treatment or perks. And I think some of the other, and I was starting to see this, like I expected to go there and see this like well-oiled running machine. No, they didn't even have like a CRM to keep track of their clients when I went there. It was like I thought like martial arts schools have CRMs. They didn't even have that. So it wasn't like what I expected, but also they never painted it that they didn't paint it like it was going to be this well-oiled machine. So it's not like they like misrepresented what I was being hired for. But I just remember I handled mastermind cancellations like my first few weeks, and I was just like, holy crap. I'm like, why is everyone canceling? It was just like handling complaint after complaint after complaint. And so at this point, we fast forward a year after Nick leaves, and like Pearl Consulting's a shell. Like they still had their MABA coaching. And at this point I had to cancel all of my MABA coaching clients. I had to call each one and pretty much tell them we weren't doing coaching anymore because Michael wanted me to move over to I Love Kickboxing. They lost their whole marketing team through the span of a few months. And they're like, we need your help. We need your brain over here. And will you move over to that? So I was like, yeah, that's fine. So I moved over to I Love Kickboxing. I had my experience running Facebook ads at this point was like running ads as a little side job for 3 martial arts schools. And I wasn't even getting paid to do it. I was doing it because I liked the school owners and I was just trying to help them. I didn't have knowledge on Facebook ads. I had great knowledge building funnels. I had great knowledge knowing what converted on websites and all of that stuff. But like Facebook ads, I was a newbie. Like I managed 3 accounts up to this point. And I remember getting thrown into I Love Kickboxing, and they had like 320 locations at this time, and all the marketing was done in-house. So like we were responsible for running all the ads for 300 locations, and I'm getting moved over to a marketing team that doesn't exist. And then my now good friend Ryan Anthony, who also worked at I Love Kickboxing, wasn't really like a Facebook ads guy, but him and I, to start with, were like doing all the Facebook ads on our own, like for 300 locations, like pulling our freaking hair out. Because not only are you like managing the back end of the ads, you're also managing all the communication about marketing with the 325 locations. While this is going on, Michael has his website company called FCOM that is like losing clients like crazy. And he's like, Adam, he's like, I need you to manage FCOM. So I'm managing all these ad accounts through I Love Kickboxing. And then Michael puts me on managing FCOM, which is like the biggest dumpster fire I've ever seen in my life at this point. And if you were an FCOM client back in the day, you probably realize this, but it was a dumpster fire. Like it was almost like taking those mastermind cancellation calls my second week at there. It was just like problem after problem. And there was like a team of like 3 or 4 people running this website company, and that was it. And it wasn't enough people to support the growth. So I'm trying to do the marketing for I Love Kickboxing. I'm also managing this FCOM company. And then they had a print company as well, which I can't even remember the name of it. And their graphic designer, whoever was doing all the print orders, was no longer there. So Adam, guess what? You're good at all these other things. Like we need you to fulfill the print orders. So there's like I remember one time I'm fulfilling print orders for like window clings and brochures and rack cards and all this stuff. I'm managing all these ads and overall strategy for I Love Kickboxing, and then also trying to manage this dumpster fire of FCOM at the time. So I'm doing all of this, which also explains probably why I was there till like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, almost every day of my life. But here's like the benefit of this. When you're getting put in those 3 companies, you're not going to be able to use your superpower to its fullest. But the good thing is you're also learning how to manage multiple groups of people at the same time and multiple tasks and project manage. And I quickly realized I can't manage all this with the right software, the right tools, the right people. So then I started asking to be able to build out like the marketing team. So we start doing interviews, and this is the first time I ever interviewed anyone for a job. Like when I hired Scotty for Level Up, it was like, yo, you're cool. You're like, I've known your family forever and I've taught you, want a job? And he's like, yeah, and that was the hiring process. So I'm going through the hiring process, building out my team. Danielle, who many of you guys that have worked with the agency know, was my, I think one of our first hires. She had just graduated with a master's degree in marketing, and she was referred by Ryan Anthony. And I remember she was our first hire, and I'm teaching her Facebook ads. And I slowly we bring out all these kids fresh out of college, and none of them have run ads before, but they all have like marketing degrees. And I'm like, shit, now I got to actually teach them how to run these ads and manage all these things. So I remember we go in and we do like 2-hour whiteboard sessions where I'm just breaking down stuff. I'm showing them Facebook ad examples. I'm showing them how to research ads and look at like do competitive analysis and all this stuff. And we're just sort of figuring this out as we go. And we started building this little marketing team that starts to get better ad performance. I also remember at the same time, this is why I Love Kickboxing was getting sued by 24 other franchisees. So like, I remember my first week, I go into the I Love Kickboxing owners group, and it is like the entire group was like a double middle finger to corporate like fest. Like every post in that group was like how bad I Love Kickboxing was. Like once in a while there'd be some questions about how to do this or how is everyone doing this. But like going in that group, like people hated corporate. And I'm reading this and I'm like, what the hell did I just get myself into? And I just made a point that I'm going to go in this group and just add value as much as possible. Like I saw a group of franchisees that needed drastic help, that were looking for like support that they weren't getting, that were looking for like just someone to listen to them. Because I think all of the success from Team Perella and I Love Kickboxing over the years sort of got a me versus them mentality of like, we know what's best. You'll listen to us, not the other way around. That's just my opinion. And so because of that, there's no trust with corporate. So I was just like, well, let's get them to at least trust one person at corporate. Let me just help as much as possible and give as much time to these people as I can, and really just show them that I'm doing my best effort to just serve and be a help to them. And I built a lot of really great relationships with different ILKB franchisees during this, and a lot of people that work there, and felt like we were starting to move the needle a little bit. And then as we continue to fast through like the ILKB timeline, they started to go through a restructuring. And I remember they brought in our CEO, restructuring CEO. And I remember it was around Christmas time, and Ryan Anthony and I are sitting on the couch, and there's a Christmas tree like in the area where the couches were. And I remember this guy walks in and he looks at the tree, and then he turns to Ryan and I and he goes, looks like Santa's not coming this year. And then he just walks by, and they'd already cut like Red Bull from the office and all the free drinks we used to get. They cut all the snacks from the office. Like they were cutting everything at this point. People were getting laid off. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, that's my sign to get the F out of here. And I remember around this time, I got brought out to MX Martial Arts to train the staff for a week. They paid me to come out and train the staff for the week. And I fell in love with Arizona instantly. I came out in December, which is like perfect Arizona weather, perfect time to come out. And I was like shown all the great things about Arizona. I was like, oh, this place is pretty cool. They offered me a job, and I was just like, I'm never working for anyone again. So no, thank you. I'll pass. And then I got a call like a few weeks later, offering an ownership opportunity or investing in the agency. And I was like, all right. I was like, that makes more sense. Again, I had to convince my wife to move to Arizona, which she was done with New York, so that was pretty easy. But I remember going back and giving I gave a month notice at I Love Kickboxing. And the reason I thought a month was appropriate is because I had my hands just managing so many things that I was like, it's going to take at least a month to train a replacement. And I remember I went back. The day I went back, the HR person came up to me and they're like, hey, can I ask you an honest question? I was like, yeah. And they're like, did you go accept another offer somewhere else? And I was like, being fully honest, yeah. But I was like, I was actually going to talk to you guys today and give a month notice. So that way we have time to train someone. Because I don't want to leave you guys in a bad spot. And she goes, well, today will be your last day. And I was like, I did this as a courtesy to you guys. Like, it wasn't for me. Like, I could have just said, like, I quit today and leave. And I remember Michael called me about something else, and I told him what happened, and he was like, fuck that. And I remember he hung up, called HR, or he called me back, and he's like, you're staying on for a month. He's like, we want you to stay there. He's like, if you leave now, he's like, everybody's fucked. Like, who is doing what you're doing? And then I remember Michael's like, can you come to my house? And he's like, just walk me through what you're doing on a daily basis. And I remember sitting in Michael's living room with Ryan Anthony there, and I just walk him through like everything I'm doing. And then after like an hour, he just sort of sits back and he's like, well, I can't learn all this shit. I was like, I'll train you whoever you want. And then the conversation sort of turned like, he's like, can you stick around longer? He's like, I'll pay you X number of dollars to stay around longer, type of thing. And at that time, like, I think the writing was already on the wall for me. There's like some other underlying issues that I won't really get into on a podcast, but I just, I was already in the mindset of moving past it, but not leaving them like in a bad spot. So I moved out here, started managing MX Martial Arts. The first month at MX, we took them from like $19,000 or $20,000 to $42,000. Like, it was like, I remember we signed up over 40 people the first month I was there. We did a sale that absolutely crushed. The ads I was running for them, crushing. We had like so many leads coming in, we didn't even know what to do with it. And I was like, this was the best decision ever in February of 2022. And then COVID hit in March of 2022. Or 2020, sorry, March 2020, COVID hit. And we just had this monster month. And then it was like, God's like, hold my beer. And then I want to say in the first month of COVID, we're back at $19,000 because all the new people we signed up canceled because we didn't have enough rapport with them or a strong enough relationship with them. And then it became, how do we navigate this new thing? And it was Zoom classes like everyone else. So like almost within like 2 to 3 days, we had Zoom up and running, teaching classes. And I remember I was teaching in my backyard on the turf. I remember like for the kids' classes, I was pulling out my kids' action figures. I'm like, all right, when you see Spider-Man, you're going to shoot webs at the camera and then do your front kick. And like basically becoming Steve from Blue's Clues, sweating my ass off in my backyard in Arizona, teaching classes, not knowing if like what was going to happen, how long the lockdown was going to be, if we were going to survive. And meanwhile, I'm seeing the martial arts industry consultants, not all of them, but throw out the weirdest freaking ideas I've ever heard of to, I don't know, keep businesses going. Like, hey, you should get ordained as a minister so you can qualify as a religious institution so they can't shut you down. Like that goes against like everything I've been brought up as a Christian. And I just didn't, there was a lot of things going out there that I didn't agree with, a lot of bad advice that I didn't agree with. And then I was just like, why hasn't anyone figured out how to get virtual members? Like, it shouldn't be that hard. Like, we're going to have to, like, if this thing goes for 2 years, we're going to have to figure it out eventually anyway. So I'm like, let me start testing stuff, which this was a fun lesson also. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to run a $21 virtual trial for 21 days. And I'm going to just pitch people at the end of the first virtual class. And we'll get a commitment from them to enroll. I'm going to have to like send them a link to enroll through because we can't do it in person. So I remember I did nationwide ads for a 21 for 21 special. In like the first week, we sold 21 trials. Like I remember because it's 21, 21, 21. I think it's from a song too. But anyway, we sold like 21 trials like the first week. And I was like, there's something to this. And then I converted one out of the 21 into a membership at the first class. And I was like, well, this is a different thing through Zoom. Because this kid is running around apeshit crazy after his class. The mom can't focus. The mom's drinking a glass of wine while she's talking to me. I was like, this is just like, it is a different animal. So then I was like, well, Netflix has been doing paid trials or free trials forever. And I go, they just auto-enroll them with their credit card information at the end of the trial. So I was like, well, what if we did that? Like, what if we just do it like Netflix so people are used to that subscription model? So I'm like, let's do a 21-day trial. And we just let them know that at the end of the 21 days, it puts them in a virtual membership. And I don't know, I think we're doing like $149 a month or something like that at the time. Nothing where we should have been charging. And I remember the next 20 trials, we went 17 for 20 on. And I was like, shit, I figured out virtual memberships. Like, I figured it out. And meanwhile, the last 12 months before this, I'm getting Facebook messages from Jonathan Frank, like 3 a month. When are you going to start your own agency? When are you going to start your own agency? When are you going to start your own agency? And to me, like, the chaos of running that many ad accounts at I Love Kickboxing, I was so burnt out from running ads. And it was sort of nice just having to do it for our business and our school. But as I started doing like more live videos on Facebook and stuff, I shared the results of going 17 for 20 and getting people to pay $149 a month for a virtual membership. And also just expanding the idea of like, no, why would you just run ads for your state? I'm like, this is nationwide now. Anyone can join your classes. We had people from all over the country jumping into our virtual classes because we had figured out this membership. And then we started to narrow it down to just in-state ads only towards the end, because we're like, how are we going to get these people to convert and keep a membership when everything opens back up again? Because they're just going to go to the martial arts school down the street from them instead of keeping a virtual membership with a place halfway across the country. But that worked out so well. And then so many people are reaching out. They're like, well, how are you doing this? Like, what are you doing? And I'm like teaching it. And then people are like, hey, can you run my ads for me? And I'm just like, man, that's like mid-COVID. I was like, we're all like in the binge drinking of like I don't know, like whatever the 3-month like Costco binge drinking sessions were in the COVID phases. And I'm just still trying to figure out how we're going to come out of this and actually sustain this, because I knew virtual memberships were going to be a short time thing. I'm like, when everything reopens, like then we got to get back to figuring it out the other way. And it just so happened that Arizona was one of the first states to reopen. And so we were one of the first people to go back to, like getting classes back in session and stuff. So because we were getting good attention from doing these like live videos about how we were continuing to make money and doing virtual parents nights out and things like that during COVID, I started to, between that and Level Up and working at Pirelli, started to be established a little bit more as like a consultant in the martial arts industry at this point. And it wasn't even like a thing I was thinking about doing at the time. It was just like, I want to grow the school. I want a bunch of locations. I want all these things. And I remember we ran our first ad out of COVID. Holy crap. Like $5 leads, like all day, every day, like people buying trials at 50 to 60% trial conversion. And it was just like anything I did online worked. And I was like, holy crap. It was like, it reminded me of early Facebook ad days where you could just throw out the crappiest looking ad with stock photos, and like you look at your phone on a Monday and you're like, cool, we got 15 paid trials over the weekend and we spent $12. Like it was close to that. It wasn't that, but it was close to it. And then I was like, oh, I got this figured out thing. So like, let's do an agency. And I remember Jonathan Frank was the first person I reached out to. And I was like, hey, motherfucker. I was like, you can stop messaging me and bugging me. I'm starting the agency. I'm launching it on this date. Do you want the first spot? And he's like, absolutely, sign me up. And then we had already been using the software we'd been using at I Love Kickboxing. That was like one of the main things I added there-wise as a tool for the franchisees. So I was like, oh, we can use the same software for the agency. And then I'm like thinking about how much work it was to do all that. And I knew that Danielle was extremely underpaid. Like when I say extremely underpaid, like if you were to guess the number, you'd be wrong because it'd be lower. And I knew her value as well as what she brought, and that she was worth way more than what she's getting paid. And I remember Ryan Anthony called me and I'm on the phone with him. And he's like, he was one of the last people to get laid off from I Love Kickboxing. Or he quit, one of the two. I don't remember. But he's one of the last people to be around of that group. And he's like, hey, do you hear Danielle got laid off? And I go, no. And then Hope, this woman, Hope that was also on our team that was really great ad manager, she got laid off too. And I was like, well, I'm calling Danielle and I'm going to tell her I can pay her more than she was making out of Kickboxing. So I remember it was probably like a couple days after a layoff. And I was like, hey, you want a job? And I'm like, I'm going to start an agency. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, all I can promise is I'll pay you more than what you were making, and you can work remotely. And Danielle and I literally started to like flesh out like text message automations and all these things while this is going on. And then we're using this software, and I've never told this story before, so you guys get to hear it first. It's a completely true story. Bryce can attest to this because I called Bryce while this was happening. Michael Pirella can attest to this too, because I called Michael, even though my relationship wasn't like amazing with him at the time. But I get a call from the CEO of the software company. And we had just done our launch for the agency. And the way that we did it is we said, we're going to open 20 spots because I wasn't sure how many we'd be able to handle. The 20 spots, when I say they fill up in minutes, like it's not an exaggeration. I had people that were on it, like, let's say it was live at 9 o'clock, 9:02 a.m. I was getting a message that the page was showing sold out already. So it went really fast, and we did a good job hyping it up. So I have these 20 clients, we're getting them on the software and stuff, and I get a call from the CEO of the software company that we are not allowed to use the software anymore. Or it was sorry, the COO called me, not the CEO. He goes, we have to kick you off the software. And I was like, excuse me? I'm like, we just onboarded like our first ever clients, and they are getting kick-ass results. And I'm like, we can't lose the software in the middle of this. I'm like, you know how damaging this is to like my business? And I've never had to use lawyers or attorneys or anything up to this point. So I'm like, do I need to call an attorney? Do I need to do this? And they wouldn't tell me why. They just said that we violated one of the software terms, which there was nothing unethical we were doing at all with this. And I remember it was like probably my first big moment of panic I've ever had with any one of my businesses. Because like, what am I going to tell all these clients? And I was like, well, how long do we have to get them off? And they're like, to the end, or 48 hours is what they told me. Because it's at the end of the week, and I got called on like a Thursday, so maybe 72 hours, I don't know. But they're like, you have to use something else. So I'm like, all right. So then I get on the phone, I call Michael, because I was like, he's dealing with lawyers all the time with all the lawsuits for I Love Kickboxing. I'm like, what do I do? And to Michael's credit, he's like, if you need an attorney, he's like, I'll pay for it for you. Which at that time, like I was like, someone's actually in my corner for this. This is awesome. And then I remember calling Bryce, and Bryce and I had a relationship from when he was in the mastermind with Perella. And like we would talk occasionally, and I was telling him what was going on. And he's like, dude, that is so crazy. And then I sent an email to the CEO of the software company, and I'm pretty much just pleading my case. And like, I'm like, this is going to like devastate my company. And we just launched this, and I have all these, like, we just onboarded our first clients, and I'm like, this is completely unfair. And this CEO jumps on a call with me on Zoom, and I'm running the company out of my office. Well, not like a bedroom really, in my the house I'm living in Arizona at the time. And I have this like little foam Relentless Media Agency sign on the back, and I put some like shelves up with some Funko Pops and like, I don't know, some crap on there. And that was my like professional background for when I would do like live videos and calls. Some of you guys maybe were on some of those calls and remember those days. But I'm on the call with him, and he goes, where are you right now? And I'm like, I'm at my house. And he's like, he looks confused. I go, why? He's like, I think there's some confusion. And he goes, and I'm not trying to start shit, so I'm not going to name like this person. But there was someone else in the industry, in the martial arts industry, that had told the CEO that they were promised exclusivity for the martial arts industry with this software. And that I had teamed up with Michael to start this agency, and that we were this giant corporation, and that we were trying to put all the little guys out of business. Meanwhile, our agency that started like 2 weeks before this, and we had 20 clients, and we were charging $397 a month. We were not making like millions of dollars. We weren't even like $10,000 yet. Yeah, we were nowhere close to that. And he goes, to be honest with you, and he's like, please don't tell this guy I said it. He's like, but he goes, that guy told me you were some like giant corporation that wanted to use this and just crush all these small agencies. And he's like, I can obviously see and the one time a shitty setup paid off for me, right? He's like, I can obviously see that's not the case. And he's like, that was our mistake. And I go, well, what do I do with this other person? Like the guy that told him this. I'm like, do I need to like reach out to him and tell him to like go eat a bag? And he's like, no. He's like, I'll handle it. He's like, you're good to keep using the software. He's like, my bad. So pretty much what happened is one of our competitors saw the launch of the agency, probably saw how popular, like how quickly it sold out, knew that we were using the same software as them, and then tried to get us kicked off the software like immediately, which was a shitty move, but I always believe doing the right thing pays off. And like we stuck to doing the right thing, and we're honest with everything. And again, we were able to use the software, and it was crazy too, because I was probably one of the first people to sign up for this software at I Love Kickboxing. Like no one else was using it before that I knew of in the fitness or the martial arts industry. Everyone was doing the gym launch model of connecting 40 different softwares together to try and like get these automations going and stuff, which is what we did originally. And then we found the software that we currently use. But telling you all of this just so you can like sort of get to a good understanding of like the ups and downs like through the entrepreneurial journey, and that it's not just you going through the ups and downs. It's just not you that your competition is talking shit about. It is not just you that has the oh shit moments in their business that is like, how the hell are we going to navigate this? And I wish I could tell you that those moments will disappear forever after you go through them once. In my experience, the bigger the company, the more successful you are, the larger the problems are that are thrown at you. I would love to have the $500 problems that I used to have. I would love to have the $500 problems. And many of you guys that watch the podcast I did on Setting the Record Straight sort of know like what I've been going through in 2024 and the craziness of it. And what you don't really hear me talk about too much is how much money goes into attorney fees. At one point in this process, I had 3 different attorneys I was paying. How much goes into the PR side of this, money-wise? I wouldn't be surprised if I've eclipsed well over $100,000 going to things that I didn't expect. And the number of times during this where it was like, how are we going to get through this type of mentality? The number of times that I had self-doubt through all of this of, is there a way out of this? Is this ever going to end? Is it like there's even points like when the article came out, I was like, what are my employees going to think of me? Are they going to believe the article? Are they going to believe me? Like, and those were all constant thoughts like going through my head. There's times I thought maybe I just sell everything. Maybe I just get rid of everything. Maybe we don't do summits anymore. Maybe we don't do like mastermind events anymore. Every possible scenario went through my head during this whole process. And the reason I'm telling you that is like, number one, I just want to be transparent that like the same shit happens to me that happens to you guys. The same thoughts happen to me that happens to you guys. When I was going through this, there was multiple times I wanted to quit. There was multiple times I wanted to give up. Those thoughts went through my head constantly. The benefit I think I had is surrounding myself with enough skill building experience and like the right people with the right mindsets that even though as I would think like, oh, I should give up, I should quit, I should sell the company, I don't care if I take a loss, let's just walk, like what, all those thoughts going through my mind, the inner voice of stop being a bitch, get your shit together and push through was way stronger than all the voices of self-doubt and all of those things. And I think the only reason that's happened is because of all the books I've read, the people I've studied, the mentors that I've had. Like I've talked about this before on the podcast. Tim Grover's voice is in my head every day of like, success doesn't care if you're tired. Success doesn't care that you're going through this shit right now. Like if you're not ready for success, it's going to go to the next person. So if you're not ready for success now because of an article coming out about you, because of what's happening with your business partner, and if you don't want to push forward and be successful, then guess what? Success is going to go to somebody else. And your family is not going to get any results of that success. Your employees aren't going to get any results of that success. You're just going to go on. And that voice, the voice of my mom, like those are just voices in my head constantly in the sense of putting me back. Anytime I start to think about going off this way or doing something that doesn't align with my vision, my goals, my ethics, my values, my purpose, those are the voices that are like, hold on, motherfucker, boom. Like, this is the path you're supposed to be on. Get your ass back on that path. Also, like, a lot of you guys, like, the number of listeners I had reach out to me, like, when the article came out, that were just like, hey, just so you know, we read that article. It is bullshit. We got your back. Like, all of that, all of those messages, Kelly, the people on the team here are just being like, fuck that. Like, you need to keep doing you no matter what. That's what got me through that. So for you guys, when you guys are in times of struggle, challenge, when you guys are having that self-doubt, those moments when you just want to like kick everything to the curb, start over, all that stuff, like you need to really develop that stronger internal voice in your head that beats the shit out of the voice that's telling you to quit, and the voice that's telling you should just give up and that you should just go do something else. And like I have a lot of gratitude for all the experience I had leading up to this, because that experience is what got me through this. And then also having the right mentors plays a huge role. Another thing I haven't really talked about publicly is when in the middle of all of this going on, Bijal Patel, Bijal is an amazing friend, amazing leader of her company, great branding expert, the ultimate hype woman as well. Bijal asked me to come speak at one of her events in the middle of all of this. And I was like, all right, what do you want me to speak on? And to be honest, my head probably wasn't even in it all the way at this point, because I was just dealing with so much drama constantly, like having to go through every financial record and like sort through all that, go through every text conversation. Like it just took the focus off of what I normally do. And I'm glad to be back, like head in the game again. But she's like, I want you to speak. And I'm like, all right. I'm like, what do you want me to talk about? She's like, leadership. And I remember seeing the message from her, and my first thought was, why? Like, I was like, I'm like, Bijal, don't you know all the shit I'm dealing with? I'm like, didn't you see the article? Didn't you like see what's happening with the business partner? Like, I'm like, why the hell should I speak on leadership? I didn't say this to her at the time, but this was like all the thoughts in my head. And then the other voice is like, hey, you need to get in front of other industries. Like, other industries need to hear what you need to say. And you've learned lessons about leadership going through this. So then, if you guys have ever had the chance to eat dinner with Taylor Welch, I would 10 out of 10 recommend do it again. We had a speaker dinner the night before Bijal's event. And if you guys know me, Leah and Kelly will attest to this. My wife will attest to this. I had the humor of a fifth grader. So I'm usually like the comic relief I like to think of sometimes at these events. Luckily, Taylor, though, he was going stride for stride for me at this dinner. And Taylor was pretty much brought up to speed with what happened. And we're at dinner, and there's like 5 of us, it's all speakers. And Bijal's like, Adam, you like got to tell us what's going on in your world. And I'm like, do I have to? Like, is this a requirement of speaking tomorrow? But you guys know me, I'm a very transparent person. Like, I probably gave them too many details, but I was like, hey, this is what's going on with my ex-business partner. And I'm telling him this. And then Taylor didn't know about the whole situation with Ashley yet until until this meeting. I can't remember if the article came out yet when I did this event. I don't think it had come out yet. I think it was a little bit before that. But so he's learning about my assistant like embezzling from us like at this dinner. And he starts making fun of me. He's like, you're speaking on leadership? And I was like, I know, right? Like, we're just sort of joking about it. But then he paused for a second, and I was like, I said something like, yeah, I don't know why Bijal wants me to speak about leadership with all of this going on. And then Taylor paused and got serious for a second. And he's like, actually, he goes, this is why you're qualified to speak on leadership. He's like, exactly because of this. And the gist of the conversation was like, hey, anyone can be a great leader when it's easy. When everything is going your way, when the stars are aligned, anyone in that position can look like a great leader. The great leaders are the ones that can still lead and still get the same loyalty, still have the same drive from their team when all the odds are stacked against them. And this moment was a moment where I felt like all the odds were stacked against me. Like, my confidence was probably the lowest it's ever been. My imposter syndrome was the highest it's ever been. And I hear Taylor say that, and it starts getting me thinking in my brain. And I'm like, there's a reason why all of the generals that we remember through history are ones that were generals in war and not in times of peace, because they showed extreme leadership and a superior decision-making practice in the hardest possible time when everything is on the line and your decisions literally have life or death effects to them. They became remembered for their decisions then. And for me, it's like, do I want to go down as a losing general in this battle, or do I want to be fully supportive or do I want to be remembered as the person that didn't quit and that showed up still as a leader, and still, even when everyone was saying the worst possible things about them, stuck to their core values, did the things right and ethically, and showed people that, hey, the opinions of the entire world against you, or what felt like the entire world against you, doesn't mean shit when you know in your heart that you did the right thing, when you know in your heart that you are currently doing the right thing, that you're in line with your vision, you're in line with your purpose. And like, my why during this became even more so my family and my team. Because I'm like, if we lose the businesses, or if I lose the businesses, my team loses their income. My family loses the legacy that or a piece of the legacy I'm trying to build for them. Because legacy is not all about money. But so many other people are going to be affected by this if I don't stand up and fight. And then at one point, it just sort of like light bulb moment. And it was just like, I think I was praying, or I was listening to, oh, this is good. Maybe we can put this in the show notes. Like, I went to church with my wife, and we go to a church called Rock Point out here. And I don't think we'd gone in person to church in a little while. And I'm sitting in church, and I always think of church almost like going to a mastermind in a sense. Like, for those of you, even if you're not religious, there's always a lesson to be taught in church. And I am religious, and but I remember he started talking about Moses. And the pastor's talking about Moses, and he's like, Moses led the people of Israel through the desert for 40 years. And you would think Moses took them out of slavery and is leading them in the right direction, trying to get them a life of freedom. And he goes, 40 years later, Moses is still being criticized by these people. They're still saying that he's not the right person to follow, and that they're starving, and that they shouldn't have followed him to begin with. And all this criticism is getting thrown at Moses in the Bible, even though he's doing the right things, his heart's in the right place, and he's doing his best while making mistakes along the way, like all of us, of following what God's directing him to do. And I remember hearing this, trying not to cry. Can we go one episode without tears? But I remember looking at my wife, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, this was like for us. Like, this whole sermon was put together for us, I felt like. And he's quoting the Bible, and he's pretty much like, hey, remember, Jesus said, when the world hates you, remember it hated me first. It was like one after another, just like gold nuggets being dropped in this sermon. I think if you were a contact in my phone, I sent you this sermon afterwards, because everyone in my inner circle of my teams were going through this with me. And I just sort of saw it as a pivotal point of like, rally the troops. Like, let's get past this shit and let's start fighting back. Like, let's start finding a way to get our voice out there with all of this. And that moment was just like reassuring to me in the fact of like, oh, I'm not the only person with people talking shit about them. I'm not the only person that's had to deal with something like happening with a business partner or ex-business partner that put them in a worse position. I'm not the only one unsure of how to navigate things. And it just sort of reaffirmed it, like, if you're doing good, you're being a good person. It just was reconfirming to me that the opinions of others don't matter. Like, there's been great people through history that got shit on so hard because people just didn't understand them, or didn't get the whole story, or just didn't like them because they were doing things differently. And all of that sort of came to the head. And that was sort of the wake up call of like, no, we're gonna push through this. We're gonna push past this. We're gonna get through this. And coupled with that, with you guys having faith and you guys continuing to follow, watch, support, and sending me messages, like I feel like we finally got through it. We're past it now. We're moving forward. The businesses are starting to build back up and everything. And just want to thank you guys. Like the support and everything that you guys gave is awesome. Please don't make memes out of me crying on this podcast and post it all over the internet. Now that I said that, there's probably one coming. It's probably from Jotty Tension. But anyway, running this full circle, because it was a long-ass podcast. A lot of you guys didn't know my story. A lot of you guys maybe started following recently with the last podcast, or maybe you've been following the beginning. You saw the article. You're like, screw that dude. But I just want to give you guys assurance that there's ups and downs. There's very high ups, there's very low downs, and there's all the ones in between. And for me, the mental toughness is what is going to get you through this. The being aligned with your core values, the being aligned with your self-worth and knowing who you are as a person. That's what gets you through the turmoil. That's what gets you through like the seasons of depression. That's what gets you through the moments when you're not sure if there's a way out. It is that mental toughness and that mental fortitude, and that is built up through putting yourself in uncomfortable positions. It's built up for learning from the experiences from other people. Read books. Like every time I feel like I'm going through some shit, I go back and I read Walt Disney's story again. And I'm like, oh, my shit I went through wasn't as bad as what Walt Disney went through. Or I read about some other person that went through like the craziest possible stuff ever. Like we have people on our planet that were philosophers that got shut on their entire life until after they died. And then all of a sudden what they were teaching was proven right afterwards. And they didn't get to experience any of the, oh, that guy was right, he's awesome, like we're going to remember him forever type of thing. They got the exact opposite their entire life. And I was like, at least I don't have that. Like it could always be one step worse. That's all I got for today, guys. Thank you. If you made it all the way through this podcast, I'm going to give you a cookie the next time I see you. And continue to like, follow, and subscribe. And hopefully we will see you at the Relentless Summit, October 17th through 19th in Chandler, Arizona. You do not want to miss the speakers that we have lined up for this. It is going to be the best martial arts event of the year. And if you don't think so, I will refund your ticket in a heartbeat. See you there.
We're unstoppable, to the top, we about to go. That CEO, I need to know the impact we about to grow. Competition comical, straight A1, we on the road. Money focus for the goal, tell them what they need to know. We unstoppable.